Hi, grade 7 students. Welcome back to our science class. Get ready with the following materials. Your interactive science textbook, copybook, workbook, pen or pencil, highlighter, earphone. Are you ready for the lesson? Then follow science textbook pages 522 to 527. Chapter 14, A Trip Through Geologic Time. Lesson number 1, Fossils. We can check the lesson objectives. Explain how fossils form. Identify the different kinds of fossils. Describe what fossils tell about organisms and environments of the past. New words in this lesson: fossils, mold, cast, petrified fossil, carbon film, trace fossil, paleontologist, evolution, extinct. Review for the lesson. In this lesson, we are going to check what is a fossil, preserved remains or traces of living things, how a fossil forms. An organism dies covered by sediments. The sediments settle and harden becomes rock, preserving the remains of organism is called fossil. Look at the diagram. You can see how a fossil forms. What are the kinds of fossils? Fossils found in rock include molds and casts, petrified fossils, carbon films, and trace fossils. And finally, what do fossils show? Paleontologists use fossils to build up a picture of Earth's past environments. Now let us to check our first objectives. What are fossils? Fossils are the preserved remains or traces of living things. Most fossils form when living things die and are buried by sediment. The sediment slowly hardens into rock and preserves the shapes of the organisms. Sediment is made up of rock particles or the remains of living things. Most fossils form from animals or plants that once lived in or near quiet water, such as swamps, lakes, or shallow seas, where sediments build up. How a fossil might form. When an organism dies, its soft parts often decay quickly or are eaten by animals. That is why only hard parts of an organism generally leave fossils. These hard parts include bones, shells, teeth, seeds, and woody stems. It is rare for the soft parts of an organism to become a fossil. Stages of fossil formation. Look at the figure. You can see different stages of fossil formation. An organism dies and sinks to the bottom of a lake. The organism is covered by sediments. The sediment settle and harden becomes rock. Preserving the remains of organism become a fossil. Now let us to check our second objectives. What are the kinds of fossils? Fossils found in rock include molds and casts, petrified fossils, carbon films, and trace fossils. Other fossils form when the remains of organisms are preserved in substances such as tar, amber, or ice. Look at the example of the kinds of fossils in the figure. This concept map is used to categorize different kinds of fossils. Molds and casts, petrified fossils, carbon films, trace fossils, preserved remains. Preserved remains again divided into amber or ice or tars. Look at the diagram. Molds and casts, petrified fossils, a carbon film, diagram of trace fossils, an insect trapped in the amber, diagram of tar fossils. Now let us to explain molds and casts. The most common fossils are molds and casts. Look at the diagram, you can see the differences. A mold is a hollow area in sediment in the shape of an organism or part of an organism. A mold forms when the organism is buried in sediment. Later, water may deposit minerals and sediment into a mold, forming a cast. A cast is a solid copy of the shape of an organism. Molds and casts can preserve fine details. Second kinds of fossils are petrified fossils. A fossil may form when the remains of an organism become petrified. The term petrified means turned into stone. Look at the diagram, you can see the examples of petrified fossils. The insect and starfish, it turned into rocks. Petrified fossils are fossils in which minerals replace all of an organism or a part, such as dinosaur bone. This can also happen to wood such as tree trunks. Water carrying minerals seeps into spaces in the plant cells. Over time, the water evaporates, leaving the minerals behind. Carbon film. Another type of fossil is a carbon film, an extremely thin coating of carbon on rock. How a carbon films are formed? When sediment buries an organism, some gases escape from the sediment, leaving carbon behind. Eventually, only a thin film of carbon remains. This process can preserve the delicate parts of plant leaves and insects. Trace fossils. Trace fossils provide evidence of the activities of ancient organisms. Look at the diagram. You can see different type of footprints. A fossilized footprint is one example. How a trace fossils are formed. In such a fossil, a print is buried by sediment, which slowly becomes solid rock. Trails and burrows can also become trace fossils. Preserved remains. Some processes can preserve entire organisms. Look at the diagram. You can see how different kinds of fossils and organisms are preserved. For example, some organisms become trapped in sticky tar or tree resin. When the resin hardens, it becomes a substance called amber. Look at the figure number 1 and 3. The figure 1 is an example of amber. A small snake inside that amber. Figure 3, an insect trapped inside the tar. Freezing can also preserve remains. Look at the figure number 2 and 4. You can see some organisms trapped inside the ice. What do fossils show? Scientists who study fossils are called paleontologists. Look at the diagram. A scientist observes some fossils and he collects some data. That data is called fossil records. Together, all the information that paleontologists have gathered about past life is called the fossil record. The fossil record provides evidence about the history of life and past environments on Earth. The fossil record also shows shows how different groups of organisms have changed over time. Fossils and past environments. Paleontologists use fossils to build up a picture of Earth's past environments. The fossils found in an area tell whether the area was a shallow bay, an ocean bottom, or a freshwater swamp. Fossils also provide evidence about the past climate of a region. For example, coal has been found in Antarctica. But coal forms only from the remains of plants that grow in warm, swampy regions. The presence of coal shows that the climate of Antarctica was once much warmer than it is today. Change and the fossil record. The fossil record also reveals changes in organisms. Older rocks contain fossils of simpler organisms. Younger rocks contain fossils of both simple and more complex organisms. In other words, the fossil record shows that life on Earth has evolved or changed over time. Evolution is the change in living things over time. Fossil record provides evidences to the evolution. The fossil record shows that millions of types of organisms have evolved, but many others, including the dinosaurs, have become extinct. A type of organism is extinct if it no longer exists and will never, if again, live on Earth. Scientists use fossils to reconstruct extinct organisms and determine how they may be related to living organisms. We discuss many things in this lesson. This is the time to summarize our lesson. Fossils are the preserved remains or traces of living things. The sediment slowly hardens into rock and preserves the shapes of the organisms. Kinds of fossils are molds and casts, petrified fossils, carbon films, and trace fossils. Mold is a hollow area in sediment in the shape of an organism or part of an organism. A cast is a solid copy of the shape of an organism. Petrified fossils form when minerals replace the structure of an organism. Trace fossils provide evidence of the activities of ancient organisms. A carbon film, an extremely thin coating of carbon on rock. Scientists who study fossils are called paleontologists. The fossil record shows that life on Earth has evolved or changed over time. Now we can check some questions from this lesson. What is a fossil? How do fossils form? What is paleontology? Why do we study fossils? Describe the difference between a petrified fossil and a trace fossil. What does the fossil record show? We can check our follow-up activity. Go to the pearsonrealize.com. Do the fossil formation and the lesson quiz. I hope that you like my video. Thank you for watching my video. Good luck. See you. Bye bye.